Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super happy that you're here. To ring in the last couple of weeks of this year, I'm going to give you encore presentations of some of my favorite interviews of the last few years. Some go far enough back that you might hear me call the podcast by its old name, The Creative Mindset. Today features Marjorie Alexander, my good friend, podcaster, environmental activist, and sustainability advocate. We talk about her ultra-successful podcast, A Sustainable Mind, her thoughts on environmentalism, and how we can all do our part to push back against climate change and other issues facing us and the entire planet today. I know you're going to enjoy this show.
Being in LA for 13 years, it's one of those cities where you never quite have your footing in terms of like knowing and feeling like you belong. And then I went to Philly. I've been walking around that place for several days, and I'm like, wow, there's an amazing power in walking around in a place where everyone looks like me.
Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. In the show, I interview innovative peak performers. I talk with entrepreneurs, business owners, and creatives who are pushing the envelope to work creatively and authentically. We explore how to cultivate innovative genius to achieve our visions to succeed. This week's show is brought to you by my book, Speak From Within. If you need to communicate better and leave your listeners riveted, you'll want to check the book out. And now, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg. I'm your host, and I'm really happy that you're here. And I am thrilled to have back one of my favorite guests. Marjorie Alexander is a podcaster, coach, and budding social entrepreneur, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. She was first thrust into storytelling during her master's degree when a lack of high-quality environmental podcasts sparked the launch of A Sustainable Mind. And if you don't listen to that podcast, get ye over there right after this show and listen to that one, where Marjorie interviewed environmental change makers across the globe as her thesis project. Marjorie, see, there goes my ability to talk. Marjorie has recently embarked on her second podcast journey with Queer and Woo, a collection of personal stories and conversations with amazing queer individuals about mental health, self-care, and personal development. Marjorie has been named a top 40 LGBT under 40 by Business Equality magazine and looks forward to working more one-on-one with people in the queer community. Marjorie, welcome, and I'm so glad to have you back on the show.
I am so glad to be back on the show, and I'm so happy to be with you in this virtual room. You are one of my favorite people, and it always puts a smile on my face when we get to talk.
Oh, me too. We have a real mutual admiration society going. I'm so excited about Queer and Woo. I am, and we have so much to talk about it, but I don't want to bury the lead. I want to start right there, right with the new podcast.
Sure.
I'm dying to know about what the actual title of the show means, but also what prompted this? What inspired you? You're super busy. You've got so much going on. What prompted this pivot, this shift into a whole new paradigm for you?
Well, to start with the name, I've always, and it's so interesting in this kind of new world that we're living in, and everybody knows what that means. I'm assuming with social distancing and racial equality. I've always been the only little something, the only woman, the only little Black girl, the only queer person in so many of the circles that I'm in. In my spiritual circles, I've almost always been the only queer person, or at least the only out queer person. And in queer circles, I would love to have more conversations about spirituality and the woo-woo stuff, which I've been running from for most of my life, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that I felt super comfortable with. I think I had been really ashamed of it, really. But, a conversation that you and I had actually not too long ago, and you said, you are a true empath. And I think that's something it's a concept that I've been getting more comfortable with. And since you and I had that conversation, which for me was a very emotional conversation, actually, and sparked a lot of thoughts for me in the days after that. I purchased a lot of books since then. I'm actually sitting right next to The Empath Survival Guide by Judith Orloff. And that's been a really interesting read. But really, what Queer and Woo is about is bringing together these two conversations that never seem to exist together. And I really just got tired of having to choose.
I'm thinking. I know it sounds like it's dead air, but I'm thinking.
No, I know
So
you are. I feel the gears turning.
I know. So interesting. This is fascinating. First of all, I remember that conversation, and it was an emotional one for me too, because it was a real opportunity for both of us to discover some things about ourselves,
Mhm.
and that notion of self-discovery feels like it's part of Queer and Woo. And these conversations that you want to have that marry sort of what it sounds like the queer community and the more spiritual community are going to take you on a serious journey. And yet, right before we started this, you said, I feel nervous. And I said, oh, wait, why? And you said, let's turn on the microphone because this is relevant. And so I'm
Yeah,
wondering, how is your state of mind and your emotional state relevant, and how does it pertain to this new project you've taken on?
sure. So I'll start by saying A Sustainable Mind. If you all haven't listened to, I can't remember if we mentioned it in the last episode that I was on, but A Sustainable Mind, I started that show because it was part of my master's thesis project, and like I had a deadline. There was planning that went into that. It was an entire thesis project. It had a paper, there was a ton of research, and I
Mhm,
had a schedule and all of this. I had a plan. Not to say that I didn't have a plan for Queer and Woo, but it really was something that was more contingent upon just what I was feeling in the moment.
mhm.
I didn't have the idea for Queer and Woo until about February of this year. And the second I realized it, I instantly inside recoiled because I realized it was a conversation that I wanted to have, stories that I wanted to share, people that I wanted to help. But I have been and still am in quite a state of fear about it. I will say that the responses that I've gotten from friends or from anybody really, the responses that I've gotten from people that I thought would respond really well, they responded really poorly. And the
Really?
people that I would think would respond not poorly, but just probably wouldn't care, have been really excited, really enthusiastic about it, and think it's a fantastic idea. And so I'm putting myself in this position to um, explore parts of myself that I haven't before. And I'm also doing it potentially in front of hundreds and thousands of people. If this show, Queer and Woo, gets, say, even 10% of the listenership of my last show, that's a lot of freaking people. and and I touch on, as you mentioned in the my bio, we touch on mental health, self-care. I mentioned some of the difficulties that I've had with mental health, with thoughts of suicide and self-harm. Like that's not that's deep stuff. And with
Mhm,
A Sustainable Mind, not only is it not my story, it's totally somebody else, and it's totally, it's something that the world is kind of going through. It's not personal at all. Now, of course, as I've gotten more open and just skilled as a host, I've been able to insert parts of myself into that show.
mhm.
But Queer and Woo is really just, I feel like I'm breaking myself open and saying, here I am. But for me, it's been quite a healing journey, actually. And I'm trying to, hopefully, being successful at this, taking others along for the ride. I have had over the years so many queer friends who have all of these negative feelings about coming out too late, or um, I'm not gay enough, and they all feel so alone. And I've been out of the closet for 20 years.
Mhm.
Some of them have just come out within the last 12 months. They don't believe me when I say you're not alone. So for me to share my stories on that show just to an audience in general, it's like I'm not here just to tell you what you want or need to hear. I'm talking to everyone. And I'm also interviewing people, and they're sharing their stories with no single person in particular. They're sharing with everyone. So perhaps those words might be a little easier to digest, a little easier to believe for someone that is having challenges finding community, having challenges feeling accepted within their family, having challenges finding community. Um, did I already say that? Anyway, as we both said at the beginning of this, I think we're both lacking some sleep. So
But yet, you know what? Saying stressing community, that can't be overstressed. Saying it twice or three times is really important, I think. No,
it's
no, that's
so important. It's so important. I mean, actually, I think I mentioned it in a message that I just sent to you yesterday. I was walking around Philly with a friend, and I've lived in a few different places in my life, but being in LA for 13 years, it's one of those cities where you never quite have your footing in terms of like knowing and feeling like you belong. And then I went to Philly. I've been walking around that place for several days, and I'm like, wow, there's an amazing power in walking around in a place where everyone looks like me.
mm,
Philly is I mean, it's predominantly African American. And I was thinking about it yesterday, and not that it's necessarily the same thing with queer people, because you can't just look and see that necessarily, although you can assume people have, quote unquote gaydar and things like that. But for instance, I was driving up here to this West Virginia cabin with my friend. It's her family's cabin. And we stopped at a lookout point, and we parked and we were taking photos, and this other car came up behind us, and two people popped out. And I believe I didn't stare. I didn't stare, but it seemed to be a not a queer couple, but two queer people, and they kind of gave a big smile and a big wave, and it was just like, oh my gosh, there are people like us in West Virginia, where they're like literally Confederate flags everywhere.
right.
It's that familiarity, not necessarily that you're going to talk to each other or that you know each other, but just that moment where you realize that people have a shared experience.
Mm,
That's so important, because then you don't feel so alone. So I think for me, queer and woo is really my way of attracting other people to me, because I don't want to feel so alone in this conversation
hmm
between, sexuality and gender identity and all of those things that are really important in the queer community. And this stuff over here, the mental health stuff, the spiritual stuff, the woo-woo stuff that so many people don't want to talk about. I don't find that there is much opportunity for these two things to live in the same space. I think I've experienced that one other time. And of course, in individual conversations with friends, but it
hmm
happens incredibly rarely.
hmm
So I guess I'm just trying to build community where I haven't been able to find any so far.
And you're a trailblazer in that way, because that's what I notice about you actually, is that when you see a gap, you go, okay, I'm going to bridge that gap. I'm going to figure out what needs to be done, and I'm going to do it. And I respect that so much about you, because that's that's a rare gift to see the lack and then realize that you can do something and then go and do it. Because
Yeah.
people can see the lack, but they might not realize that they can do something, and they probably won't go and do something about it even if they do realize it. And you have all three. So I'm very honored and thrilled that I can call you my friend. I do want to know something though, and this is something that you said earlier, that you grew up being the only in
Mhm.
your communities and in your circles, the only spiritual person or the only queer person. And that feeling of isolation, it sounds like, drove some of the desire and the decision making in starting Queer and Woo. What did you do for self care in those times when you were alone, before you had the platform like Queer and Woo, like a sustainable mind? What were you doing then to take care of yourself, to so that you could be here now, essentially?
Wow. That's a difficult question, because I think for so long I was doing nothing. and that
Mm.
was part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was I was gosh, I mean, going back all the way to college 15 years ago, I wasn't doing anything. I was crying a lot.
Mm.
I was beating myself up emotionally. I'm a very emotional person, and at that point in my life, I didn't realize that I was an emotional person, which I think is really hilarious because I cry constantly.
Mm.
I cry insurance commercials, Isolda. I mean, really,
Mm-hmm.
it's embarrassing. Um,
I'm
what's
right there with you. I do too. AT&T commercials get me every time.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I think um really what I defaulted to was seeking out community. Even though don't really I've never really considered myself a people person.
Hmm.
Um I'm certainly not a person that wants to be around a lot of people. I'm not into like big parties or going to clubs, and if I do those things, I'm holding up the wall, the entire time, kind of observing things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just to be in those spaces with people that are like me, even though I'm not participating, to be an observer and just to be physically in that space
Mm-hmm.
felt good and felt like enough of community where I was able to just relax. So I wasn't brave enough to engage for many years. People knew I was gay, but um, I just didn't participate. So that's what I did for self care at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of issues with rumination. Um, at some particular points, I won't say that I abused alcohol, but I definitely used it as a crutch.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there have definitely been some rough times, and I can't say that I've had good coping mechanisms until fairly recently. And I'm 34. I can't say that I really had good self care strategies until probably 30 years old. In the last few years, and you mentioned a sustainable mind, um, I am a part of a couple of communities now that aren't queer. One very strong spiritual community, Agape International Spiritual Center, and that's uh, an actual, you could say, church, quote unquote church, but
Mm-hmm.
it's non-denominational, and I have been going there for almost a decade, maybe over a decade at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So that feels really good, and they're very accepting to anyone and everyone, and that feels really good and really authentic. And I know that when I go there, when I show up, it's going to be unconditional love, and I don't have to worry about saying the right thing or doing the right thing or looking stupid or feeling alone. You walk in and they have this thing that they do there when it's your first time being there in person. You stand up and they say this long mantra sort of thing. Actually, it's an affirmation to you, and everybody's putting up. It kind of feels cultish. Like if you Google cult Los Angeles, I think Agape is like number 7 on the list.
Ah.
So it can seem weird, but I guess that's kind of where the woo comes from. Like there are these, like I say self-care, and people are like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, meditation, like that word feels good. But then you start talking about like visualization and spirituality, and while it's the same stuff, people get really turned off by that.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, going to Agape, they put out their hands, just sending you their positive energy. And that was an incredibly moving experience to me. And I kind of just have latched on to that community ever since I started going there 10 plus years ago. As far as self care now, especially in the time of Corona, I take a lot of walks. I can recognize better these days when I am getting emotionally just not in a good place, or uh am at risk of spiraling.
Mm.
And I just get up from my desk and I just go for a walk. And sometimes, especially I think in those days after I realized that I needed to do this show, those walks were like 3.5 hours long.
Mm.
I was working through so much in my brain because I knew that I wanted to do it. I knew that I needed to do it for me. And I knew that me sharing my story would help a lot of other people. But I also knew it was going to be really hard, and it was going to be, I don't want to be dramatic, but physically painful. I mean, I do feel physical pain with a lot of things, which I think touches on the whole empath thing, which I'm kind of just, like I said earlier, I'm still kind of just now getting comfortable with even being able to say that out loud to somebody else. And just in the last couple of days, I feel like I've actually had to like defend that. So why do you think you're an empath? I'm like, see, this is why I don't fucking say anything. Sorry. Sorry,
Oh,
I use this curse, but like,
don't apologize. This is exactly where you are. No problem.
yeah, I'm like, this is why I don't say anything. This is why I haven't said anything to myself, and this is why I don't say anything to other people, because I just didn't want to have to, like, I don't even, this is why I have this freaking book. I don't know anything about what being an empath is all about, or even if I am a real empath. I have no idea. I'm just learning. I'm trying to discover it, and I'm not closing off any possibilities. But being put in a position where I feel like I have to defend myself, it gets my blood pressure up. And right now my blood pressure is up just talking about it.
Hmm.
You know, those two particular conversations. So anyway, that was a long roundabout way of answering whatever the question is that you just asked.
I adore you. That was great. You know what's really interesting to me is as soon as somebody asks a question like that, a deeply personal question, like what makes you think you're an empath, the thing when you said that, I kind of this is me. I am empathic as well, and this is me going, oh, that person must be in such pain.
Yeah.
They're probably wondering why either they feel stuff and don't understand it, or why they don't feel enough and don't
Mm,
understand it. And
mhm.
so instead of talking about themselves and thinking about themselves and dealing with themselves, there's an attack on you so that they don't have to think about themselves and deal
Right.
with their own pain.
And
It's
to be fair, because I guarantee you both of those people will listen to this eventually. I think that so the what makes you think you're an empath is probably the way that I received it. I think what they actually said was, "Why do you think that?" Or anyway, it just, it was softer, but it landed hard, I
you
guess
know
is a better
it
way to put it.
Here's what's interesting about that, and I mean no insult to your friends or colleagues. It's just whenever the word why comes in, inherent to why is defend yourself,
Yeah.
because it's asking for a justification for
Mhm.
whatever the thing is, and that is they're inherent to it. It's buried, but it's there. So to me, what makes you think you're an empath is actually the softer question. And so if you heard why and then you softened it to what makes you think, I can understand that there's a need, a feeling like you have to defend your stance, which is to me one of those things where I go, what is it that makes us go, I need to justify this, not because it's a valid question, but because you asked and I feel like I have to answer. You
Mm,
know,
mhm.
it is interesting when we think about that I have to justify what I just said. You
Yeah.
don't. You don't actually have to justify it because this is your process and it's your story.
Mhm.
So it's fascinating that we immediately go, oh, then I must have to answer it. No, you don't. You don't have to at all. And yet we feel conditioned that we should. It's fascinating.
You know, what's interesting about this, my travel buddy here, we were talking the other day about answers. She's a law student,
Hmm.
and she asked me, or she commented, I believe, I never use yes and no answers.
Hmm.
And she went away. I think she went into a store or something. I was sitting in the car, and I was thinking about it because I knew the answer to why I do that, but I couldn't remember. And then I remembered all of a sudden, back to my childhood, a yes and no answer in my household was never enough. You had to be able to share why, how you came to that conclusion,
Hmm.
your thought process.
Hmm.
And be able to effectively communicate all of that to someone else.
Mhm.
And that was actually a very intentional thing that I talked to my mom about. I mean, she did that intentionally.
Mhm.
And as an adult at this point, while it was a good thing, I think either I took it to the extreme or it's had a detriment to it's been detrimental to my ability to
Mhm.
communicate with people effectively is not really the word, but just I just have to over explain everything. It's exhausting. And I
Mhm.
think it makes others feel like I actually don't know what it makes others feel because I've never really asked them, but it makes conversations difficult. It makes communication difficult. To over communicate is a thing for sure. And it can be detrimental to the understanding of the overall concept or idea or whatever it is that you're trying to talk about. It's not always a good thing. Or it can be taken to a place where I guess it's a bell curve, like there's that perfect amount of information. You can have too little or you can have too much. There's that perfect amount, but I always seem to go on to like the over the hill and then I'm just riding a slide on my way down to way too much information, which is what I kind of feel like I'm doing right now, which I'm sure you're going to say, "No, you're not, Marjorie. You're just being yourself."
Actually, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not. I'm not gonna say that at all. I am going to say that when we communicate, in my opinion, when you communicate, if what you're saying is authentic, if what you're saying is true to who you are,
Mm,
it's fascinating to anyone who really wants to know who you are
mm,
and who you are in that moment. So to me, though, that exchange of ideas, even if it is what you call over explaining, I don't think it's over explaining. I think it is delving deeper,
mm,
which is different. Okay, and it's different because it's one of those things. I don't know if this happens to you, but I will solve your problems tattooed in invisible ink on my forehead. So if I ever ask someone, when I meet someone and I'll go, "Hi, how are you?" They'll go, "Well, let me tell you about all the horrible things that are going on in my life." Instead of going, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" I get this litany of all the stuff in their life that it's like they finally found someone that they can unload all of this to.
mhm,
And partially it's because I'm fascinated by it. I know that that's partially why that tattoo exists on my forehead is because I'm fascinated by our experience. This is it. This is our life, So if you've got stuff to say, I've got ears to listen. And that's the point for me is that to me that's not over explaining. To me that's you sharing your experience of who you are and trying to use words which are sometimes woefully insufficient to express the depths of your soul. To
mm,
me, I'm honored by that. That's what I
mm,
think. So it's not about it's just who you are, it's you sharing who you are, and to me, that's fascinating. Does that make
mm.
sense?
That makes a ton of sense, and I feel like I have the same experience with a lot of people. A lot of people. I am there. I don't know. They just come to me with these things that they've never told anyone else. I'm like, why am
Mhm,
I the person that they pick? Now, of course, I don't care, and I don't say that. I just sit there and listen, and I too am fascinated by their stories and sometimes their challenges and
mhm,
concerns.
mhm,
Um, Finding those people for myself, not that I seek it out a whole ton, um, has been challenging. And I think that that's what you saying what you just said has reminded me of. Not to say that the universe is going to be 50-50 in all ways, but it's nice to know that you've got a couple of those people out there in the world that while you're sitting there absorbing, not necessarily absorbing, that's a poor word choice, um, being the mirror or the sounding board or just kind of the shoulder for so many people, if there are one or two people out there who can be that for you, that's been really challenging for me to
mhm,
find those people.
mhm.
And I think when we had that conversation that we referred to 20 minutes ago or whatever, I think I reached out because I needed that, and I
Mhm.
didn't know who to call, which is interesting because I mean, I've got some very close friends, but not all friends are good for every kind of thing,
Mhm.
every kind of conversation. And I just knew that you would be accepting and listen and be non-judgmental and just hold space for me. And to have someone in your life that can just hold space isn't going to pick it apart what you're saying or badger you as to why. That's super important. That's super important to find those people. And when you find those people, man, you got to hold on to them. You just have to because you never know being that type of person when you're going to save someone's life, truly. And I had that experience very recently. Someone needed me, and I said, I'm getting on a plane. I'm landing in however many hours. I will call you immediately after I land. And she had a um what she had read as a demonic experience. I have no idea what really she was experiencing, but that's what she felt, and I was just going to be there for her. And
Mhm.
when I got home to where I was going, I got on the phone with her and we talked for probably an hour. She just needed somebody to be there,
Mhm.
be non judgmental. I'm not going to ask her why. I'm just, how did you feel? Or, talking about her husband, like, was he supportive? How did he react? Is everything okay? Like, where are you at with this? I guess now that I think about it, doing queer and woo, I'm just trying to be that person for more people and maybe even for myself.
That's exactly the next thing I was gonna say. It's funny. It really is. I was gonna say that's to me, that's why queer and woo exists, is because it's a natural extension of who you are. And who you are, at least in part, is that person. You not just the sounding board, but the vessel.
Hmm.
And providing it's funny because so often people who are vessels of that kind of really intimate communication and sharing end up not just being a vessel but a crucible, because by listening you foster change, you foster transformation, because that person, this woman who had, I'm assuming woman because you referred to her as
Yes.
a she,
Hmm.
when she had this experience, obviously it's whatever it was, it doesn't even matter, but obviously it affected her deeply, and she had no touchstone. There
Yeah.
was no there was It was uncharted waters for her. So and she needed someone who would help her get through it. And you were there, and I can easily see you going, okay. And this means that I can be there for others in this way also. But it's sharing your story, which is so personal and so intimate. And and I appreciate that about you very much, that you're willing to be vulnerable like that. And because we walk around with facades, every single one of us, and it can be so challenging to go, okay, no, this is who I really am right now, right here. And I'm open
Hmm.
hearted, and I'm open spirited. I'm honored to know you, and I honor you for that. That's really something.
We must be kindred spirits. I don't know what happened, but when we met, I was just like, I don't know. I don't know about this person, but there's just something about her. She's freaking awesome.
As I said earlier, mutual admiration society. I love it. So now I'm going to pivot and I'm going to talk to you about Star Trek.
Sure.
Okay. Are you a Star Trek fan?
I used to be back in the day, mostly the Next Generation, but then I kind of fell off, and I'm not a fan of the movies,
Okay.
but I really like the TV shows.
Awesome. So, did you ever see the original Star Trek series episode, The Empath?
No. Wait.
Ah,
Wait a second.
ah, yes.
No, I don't think I have. Tell me,
Okay.
tell me.
So this episode holds a special place in my heart for many reasons. The first of which is when my family first moved to this country, to the USA, we didn't have a television, we didn't speak English, and our neighbors invited us over to watch television. And the very first thing I ever saw was Star Trek, and specifically the Star Trek episode called The Empath. And why it was so cool is that there's actually very little dialogue.
Hmm.
And the reason is because Spock, McCoy, and Kirk go down to this planet where there's this beautiful young woman who has this unique ability. And her ability is that if you are in pain or if you're injured, she can touch you and she can heal your pain. But the problem is that what happens to her is that whatever injury you have, she has to experience as part
Mm.
of healing you.
Mhm.
And there's a point at which, McCoy has cuts on his face, and she touches his face, and they heal from his face as if they'd never been, but then they actually appear on her face, and she has to experience the pain of all of that in order to heal it through, and then she heals again, and she's back to being normal after she experiences this. And when I saw that, it went, oh, because that is the physical manifestation of being an empath, right?
Mm. Mhm.
That's the thing that we don't talk about with empaths, is that moment of experiencing someone's pain as if it's yours, experiencing someone's joy also, but for the purposes of that episode, of that Star Trek episode, she had to experience their pain in order to be able to heal them. And
Mhm.
when we talk about empaths now, we talk about it most often as emotional drama or
Yes.
trauma, right? So
Mhm.
when I say to you that I believe you're an empath, as you go on this journey to explore that and explore queer and woo and what that means as far as sharing your story and inviting other people to share theirs, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That idea of, to be an empath means that you experience the heartache or the trauma or the pain just about as if you are the person actually experiencing it. And so you take
Yeah.
that in. And when you provided that crucible for the woman you were talking to, and when you provide that crucible for your guests and for your listeners, that you in some way as an empath experience the pain and the process that they're going through in order to transform it and heal it. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Do you understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely makes sense for sure.
So there's something that I want to, this is going really deep. Uh, when when we first started chatting, you had mentioned that as part of your earlier life, that there was that you experienced self-harm and even sometimes suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
And you said something that I thought was interesting. You said, and I didn't even know why. And I would love to see with you right now what that means to you with respect to being an empath. And here's what I mean. As an empath, you walk around daily with that taking on of other people's pain. And I don't know that you can help it as an empath, until you learn how to shield, and I can help you with that. But until you learn how to shield, it's a battering ram. It's a constant thing. And I think that there
Yeah.
are probably many empaths out there who don't know why they feel the way they do, but yet they're steeping in so much trauma in the world.
Mhm.
And so I'd love to get your thoughts on that for yourself. What do you think about that? That idea of, as an empath, it kind of makes me go, well, it's no wonder. It's no wonder that you felt that trauma as if it was happening to you, because you are empathic. And the world is not, on the whole, right now, a particularly happy place.
Yeah. Um, I guess it's not interesting. I'm in this cabin in the backwoods. I have nothing to do but think
Ah,
and read this book. But I was actually thinking about this exact thing yesterday. If it was a possibility that when I was younger feeling those things, if they weren't mine, if those emotions weren't mine, if they were
mm-hmm,
just, if I had picked them up, or I don't know. I didn't get really a feeling of relief from that.
mm-hmm,
Probably because prob I'm a bit of a, I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but when it's not mine, it means that I can't do anything about it. Now as an adult, and understanding that there are people that feel these things and that
mm-hmm,
you can shield from them. I've picked up a couple of things along the way, over the last couple of years in various groups that I'm in, also with people who are empaths or clairvoyant, and things like that. And so I've learned a few things. I'm not really good at practicing them.
mm-hmm,
Um, I think because I'm in my head so much, it's not a comforting thought to know or to think that possibly those emotions weren't my own, because maybe it doesn't feel fair, maybe it doesn't feel, or maybe the amount of anger and sadness that I had around it, I was trying so hard to control that or manage that, and at the end of the day I wasn't going to be able to.
mm-hmm,
For There are a lot of things in my life that I look back and I'm like, that makes sense, and I feel a sense of relief.
mm-hmm.
I don't have a sense of relief about that. I had that thought yesterday. It makes me more emotional, I guess. I haven't really figured out how to get on the other side of that. And maybe once I do figure out how to shield up, as one energy worker that I've worked with in the past has taught me to do, shield up. And I always forget to do it. Or maybe I'm just uh stubborn. I'm like, I don't need to do that. I'll just go about the world the way that I've been doing it. You know, um, Maybe I don't want to be special in this way, or even special. I don't even, I don't like that word. I don't want to be different in this way. Like, I don't feel like I necessarily want to be an empath, or I guess maybe I'm hoping that I'm not. Because it seems more complicated. It feels like if I feel the feelings and they're my own, then one day I'll learn how to control them, or whatever the trigger was that made me feel this way, I can control that situation, or
Mm-hmm,
talk to that person differently, or don't do that, or whatever, that I can control it more.
mm-hmm,
And to think that those emotions aren't mine, it doesn't feel empowering right now. I also know that this is a journey and I'm right at the beginning, like right at the beginning.
mm-hmm,
And so, I have to be gentle with myself and patient with myself, neither of which happen very often. But the things that when I do my solo episodes of my new show, I'm giving all of this advice, things that I've learned over the years, and do for myself sometimes, but still I forget, and I get in that place and I get really upset because I'm like trying to do it the way that I feel like it should be done. I'm like, Marjorie, that doesn't work. Sometimes trying hard isn't the solution. Sometimes trying at all isn't the solution, and letting go is. And letting go of things is not really my strong suit. So that's all I got for you.
I love it. I love it. See, it's so interesting because everything that you're saying makes such a huge amount of sense. And here's the trouble. The trouble for me is I'm listening to you and I'm going, yes, 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 yes. A whole bunch of yeses because, yeah, of course it isn't fair. Your feelings should be yours, my feelings should be mine, and we should all live happily ever after. The trouble is, of course, that that's not the world we live in. And I think what you said about being emotional around this, it makes a lot of sense, right? That you would be. And being being at the start of a journey like this, you can't know where you'll be later or when you finish. You can't know. So when we think about this idea of being empathic and allowing ourselves the opportunity, I think, to not know, to not control, that's powerful. Like you said, letting go is hard for you. But can you transform that? Can you look at it differently so that it's not about letting go of it, but instead being like a rock in a river? The water flows around you, but doesn't take you with it.
Mm, that's I'm gonna have to think about that.
Shielding is, we can call it visualization, imagination, doesn't matter to me. Some people get triggered by those words,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And yet, it's about protecting the very emotional, fragile core of who we are. That to me is what it's about. And so, in the process of being there for other people, like with Queer and Woo, you can't lose yourself, right? And that's what shielding is for. That's what taking care of yourself is for, so that you don't lose yourself in the maelstrom of all that's going on around you. So when you
Yeah.
do that, when you take care of yourself, that's you doing right, not just for you, but doing right for everybody in your circles. Do you know what I mean? It's something that we tend not to think about as important for others. Our self-care being important for others is hard for a lot of very caring people to accept, but it's really true.
Mm-hmm. And I know that I need to. I need is a strong word. I want to take better care of myself because I know it's only in taking care of myself that I can offer anything truly to anyone else that's truly, truly authentic. And the older I get, the more in touch with those deeper, what used to be darker corners of myself, um, as I get more acquainted with that stuff, I want to share more of those things. I know that I need to take care of myself. And also with this show, I need to talk the talk and walk the walk. I can't just be
Mm,
saying these things and not being a good example. I suppose in a way, this is also my way of keeping myself accountable.
fascinating.
I tend to do that. I put like really high stakes out there because I know that if no one's watching, it's not that I won't do it. It's just going to be a much slower and completely unmotivated process.
Mm, mhm,
But when other people are counting on me, and I am a bit of a people pleaser, because I care, I want to take care of people, and people come to me
mhm,
because they need, for whatever reason and in whatever way, need to be taken care of. Or
mhm,
just that term doesn't really communicate what I mean. I mean, it's really just, like we said earlier, holding space for people.
mhm,
And I also know, based on the self discovery that I've been doing over these last few months, I really want to help people know that they're absolutely worthy of happiness, worthy of love, just worthy of being here. I think when I was younger, feeling those feelings of self-harm and you know, following through on some of those things, I needed that. And when I have friends or acquaintances these days, or not so much these days because it's far, far less at this point, but say in college or in my 20s, knowing people that are in that place themselves, I just want to hold them emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even physically.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to hold them. And I know that if I can't put myself in a more, if I can't give myself a more level emotional experience, that I will take that on, empath or not. That's just the human experience, right? To have empathy is something that a lot of people do or can do
Mm-hmm.
for others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to care for people in the way that I want to, this is absolutely something that I need to learn to do. But everything just feels slow. Um, because it's kind of been just a really long, meandering way of coming to this realization. And I know that if I came to it earlier, things would have been a lot easier. But also, if I knew earlier, I wouldn't be who I am. So, all of those things together, sometimes it makes me feel powerful. Other times it makes me feel validated. Other times it makes me feel sad. And I just got to lean into that and say it's okay. But, I have this experience a lot now where it's almost like the angel and the devil on the shoulders
Mm-hmm.
of like, yeah, Marjorie, you're right on track. You're exactly where you need to be. Keep on going. Keep on pushing. And the other shoulder, it's like, F that. Who cares? Stay in bed, take a nap. These people suck. I want to quit my job. And it's interesting because you are not your thoughts. And so I've gotten to a point now where I can watch both of these things kind of have this conversation, and I'm completely separate. And
Mm-hmm.
then they finish and they get it out of their system, and then I just kind of go about my business. But anyway, I'm going off track here.
Not at all, actually. You are so not alone. Everybody's got that little angel and devil on their shoulder, and there's a constant barrage of that. Every decision you have to make, there's a yes or no, a should I or shouldn't I, a will I or won't I. And almost always the little angel is saying one thing and the little devil is saying the other, depending on the situation. So we're all constantly faced with that. And we all constantly have to make those decisions minute by minute, second by second. So you're just being honest that that there are times when that's what you experience. I experience that daily. And the thing for me though is that inevitably, if I give in to the little, oh, go be lethargic or lackadaisical for a little while, just go find a froofy umbrella drink, inevitably something will come and swat me upside the head and go, this is the fee for having done that. So it's a way of keeping myself on the
I
straight
like
and
that, the
narrow.
fee.
Because there are consequences, right? So it's fascinating, but that's been the experience of my life all these many years. Something you said that I found fascinating, and that relates directly to something that I say to just about every life coaching client I have when we first start, that you are worthy of being here. And what I say is you deserve to be here. And in fact, I tell my clients that they need to start writing that out as an affirmation in a journal every day, 5 times in the morning, 5 times in the evening, because there are people, many of us, I think, that have question about that, that think in their deepest, darkest selves that they maybe don't deserve to be here. And
Mm,
that's the very first thing. So you hit on a core belief that I think we need to be aware of, that there are people who question that. Many of us question whether or not we deserve to be here. And if you're listening to this, you deserve to be here. So important. Remind yourself of that. If that is something that you ever question, you do by the virtue of the fact that you're here, you deserve to be here. Full stop.
mhm. Yeah.
So fascinating to me that you're taking this tack with queer and woo and also your own personal journey with this as one of the pillars, with this as one of the guideposts that you deserve, that you are worthy of being here. I love that. And I'm wondering how sharing your personal story and how eliciting the personal stories of your guests helps with that. What do you think? How do you think that works in the process of this very personal journey that you're taking?
You're gonna have to ask that question again.
Well, okay, let's
I
see.
mean, I think I gotcha. I just,
I
oh
asked a lot
goodness.
in that question. I know. Basically, what I'm wondering is this idea of the self sense of self-worth, the I deserve to be here. How
Mhm.
what role does that play in your personal journey with queer and woo and also in the journeys of the people that you interview? What role does
Mm.
that question play in what you're trying to achieve? I know I don't ask
Well,
easy questions, do I?
no, you don't. You don't. My gosh. Well, a big part of it is that I share things on this show that I've never shared
Mhm.
with anyone,
Mhm.
or have at least never shared with, have only ever shared with like one or two people. And I will admit I've been kind of flying under the radar. I've really not been promoting a whole lot, which is ironic because I do help run a podcast production company. Like, it's not like I don't know what to do. I think I'm afraid of doing it because I'm like, I'm putting out all this personal stuff and then everyone's gonna know. Uh Feeling worthy. You know, I think self-care is what you do when you realize that you are worthy.
Mm.
And the stories of the guests that I've interviewed so far have almost always started with, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I should be here. I was shunned by my family or the religious tradition that I grew up in.
Mhm.
Completely feeling completely invisible or invalid as a being in
Mm.
those spaces.
Mhm.
And how those people, my interviewees, had that realization or got through that process in order to understand, yeah, you belong here too. I think it's only at that point when it's like, okay, my self-esteem is high enough. I can kind of look at my experiences in the past and understand, yes, all of those things were hurtful, but I made it through.
Mhm.
I understand that my experience is just as valid as anyone else's. Now I'm going to take care of myself because I understand that I have something to contribute as well. When you're not validated and when you're made to feel invisible, anything that you contribute to the world doesn't fucking matter.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, then why wake up in the morning? So the whole feeling worthy thing, I don't know. It's just, I think it's been such a long journey for me personally. While I've been being, while I've been the sounding board or holding space for others, I wasn't always in that place myself while I was doing it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while in my mind thinking, if I did this for myself, imagine how much farther along I would be. And I'm thinking that in the moment
Mm-hmm.
that I'm with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really messed up thing to think. It makes sense, but it feels really shitty. Like, I don't know, it just feels terrible. It just feels terrible.
What's terrible about it?
To think that you're only put on this earth to serve other people and that you as aren't intrinsically valuable yourself,
Hmm.
which I have felt for much of my life. Expendable, in the way, like I have to apologize for existing. That's how I felt for a lot of my life. And part of the way that I have been able to get over that is because I know that I help people, whether they're my friends or my clients or now listeners of this podcast or of my other podcast. And so that's how I've been able to like build value
Mm.
for my like in my own mind about myself. But I'm still working on the whole, if I stop all of that stuff, do I still deserve to be here? I'm still working on that. Like I'm tearing up right now just thinking about that. Even though I mean, I know it intellectually, but like to actually integrate that into your body, I'm not there yet at all.
And that might be one of your life lessons. It might be something that you keep working towards because you I don't know. It feels so strange to say that to you because of course you have intrinsic worth. You're fabulous and wonderful and all of those other things. But the problem with that kind of thing is that it's a bomb. Me saying that to you, it's a bomb. It's, oh, I can tell you how wonderful you are, but until you know it inside your own self, there's always going to be a part of you that says, no, I'm not. And that no, I'm not it's an intrusive little flirt. It's not helpful. It's
Yeah.
not helpful. And so the question then becomes, what do we do about that intrusive little flirt? What do we do to root it out so that it's not part of the conversation anymore? Because that's what it
Because
is.
you can't beat your worthy into somebody. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly. Exactly.
that's what I feel like I need, but you can't do that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
And
slow process.
but to me it's a process of discovery and unfolding. That's how I look at it, because some of us have knowledge of our intrinsic worth when we're born somehow, or we have parenting that supports it. I don't know. I don't know what that is for everybody. Certainly I can't possibly know what that is for everybody. But the people I've talked to who believe in being of service in the way that you've described, many of them have also said that there is this fear of, what if I stopped? Would I still be okay? Or
Mm-hmm.
am I just here to be of service to others? And the trick for me where I got my sense of self-worth also was fixing other people's problems from the time I was 5 years old, at least,
Mm-hmm.
was that I acknowledged to myself that it was okay to fill my own well.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That it is okay for me not to be of service, and by so that I can fill my own well. And by that acknowledgement, sort of the math of it, the math of it took over and went, okay. So if it's okay, if you think that you're only worthy as long as you're helping, but yet it's also okay for you to stop helping in order to fill your own well, then If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, the transitive property of equality, that means that it must also be okay for you to just be.
Yeah.
And that was I ended up getting that pretty young, I think. I was probably 11 years old when I figured that out. Uh, I don't often talk about my family history. It's not pretty, but I had to be the adult in my family for
Mm-hmm.
decades, right? I was the adult starting when I was about 5 years old. And when you have to do that, when there's no safety, when there's no security in the family unit, whatever the family unit happens to be, that part doesn't matter, then somebody has to take the lead. And it sounds like you took the lead also. And when you
Yes.
take the lead that young, and the adults in the room end up going, yes, I abdicate because you're the one who knows what you're doing, that sets up that idea, I think, of you're only worth something if you're helping someone else, because boy, did you start young doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
now who you are and what you're doing, it's familiar. It's familiar. You know how to do that. You know how to fix people. You know how to solve their problems. And boy, is it an easy coat to put on and work with. But that doesn't mean that it's helping you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. A therapist once told Rich and me that we were having some issues and we went to couples therapy. And she said, I firmly believe that the very things that helped you survive as a child are often the biggest obstacles you have as an adult.
Yes.
And it kicked my butt. I was like, what? And I had to think that one through, but it's really true. And so the fact that you're even thinking about it, Marjorie, is so amazing to me, because you take all of that and you put it into all of your work, into all of the different things that you're doing. That same I can fix it feeling is there. And so, is it possible to not always be the fixer? Is it possible to sometimes just be the receiver of someone else's caring? And what does that look like?
I mean, I'm sure it's okay.
I'm sure it's
I,
okay.
you know, I
I love it.
being here in this cabin for, I think at the end of the trip we'll have been here for 9 days,
Mm,
and I've almost never traveled with people, like non-family, like
mhm,
just friends or whatever, partners. And in this way, I've really never traveled with anyone. And when you travel, things are unfamiliar.
mhm,
You got to figure out the food situation. You don't know the house or the accommodations of where you're going to be staying, and all of these things. And my friend and I, we have kind of fallen into these roles, and we work, I think, very well with each other. Um, and just thinking about, she enjoys cooking and is an excellent cook. And that's something that I don't particularly enjoy people doing for me. Like, I don't enjoy people doing things for me. She I was at her place before we left, and I needed to do a load of laundry, and she like offered to do it. I don't know what her intention was behind offering, other than just, it's her house, she knows where the laundry is. And I was like, nope. I've been doing my own laundry since I was 7.
mm,
Like, I
mhm,
don't like people doing things for me. I don't like to feel babied. I haven't liked to be taken. It's just like you said, this is unfamiliar.
mhm,
To
mhm,
take care of others, it's very familiar territory for me. And the very few times when, oh my God, just this entire conversation with you is so perfectly timed, because I'm literally going through all of these things right now.
mm,
She and I went for a walk, um, beautiful walk through this complex. I can't see your neighbors, but sometimes you can hear them. So we're just basically walking through the woods and talking about, um, just opening yourself to be taken care of. And what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that open you up to and allow you to do? Just to be in a state of receiving. So difficult for certain people, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, growing up and being the caretaker or being the person that knows all of the answers. Marjorie will take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Marjorie's got the patience of Job. Go ask Marjorie. She's got the answer. Like I'm so tired of being that person.
Mm-hmm.
And to just sit and be still enough and let my mind rest enough and just trust that someone else can do something as simple as cook me a meal without me feeling like I owe them something, because that's been a huge thing in my family. We're talking about people who buy you gifts that at the end of the day aren't gifts, they're loans, and you now owe people something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do I know that you're not going to turn around and tomorrow or in a year or 10 years from now want something from me? From something that I didn't even ask for, something you offered me. You offered me a gift, and I took that at face value. And now you're telling me that I owe you something, that gift had contingencies, but you didn't. Like, the rules aren't fair. It's not fair. You didn't tell me what the rules were. I would have played the game differently if I'd known.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, just to be in a mode of receiving has been really difficult. And now, I just know the people that I can do that with. It's not necessarily that I feel like I've gotten better at it. I just know the people who are going to be honest with me about what they want out of the situation, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just really being able to be either in an equal partnership where, like I said, you know the rules, or just be in a state of receiving and they're not expecting anything from you. That's been a huge exercise for me. Um, Not comfortable, but I am getting used to it.
It's something that is a quest, I think, getting relaxed enough to be able to receive without waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And yet, how fascinating that outside of queer and woo, so much of what you do is the service aspect of who you are. You know, it is so interesting to me that is such a powerful driving force, that of course you'll fix it. Of course you'll figure it out. Of course you'll get to the answer if somebody has a question, even if maybe it's a control thing. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe because it's your decision to do these things, to serve in this way, rather than that someone else expects it of you. No one expects you to do queer and woo. No one expects you to do a sustainable mind. It's something you've chosen. And maybe that's the difference, because it's your choice.
Mm, that's very possible. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Well, you know me, my brain works differently. but yeah, so I find it so fascinating that, I mean, I find you fascinating, first of all, but I find it fascinating that you're so giving in
Yet I'm so
so.
angry about it.
But no, but see, that's the thing. It's not there. It's almost
I'm
like there
kidding.
are two. No, but there is some anger. Obviously, you've just said there is. So this idea of when it's my choice, when I choose, when you choose it, it's a very different story than when someone else just expects it. Do you understand
Mm,
what I mean?
yeah.
And so a sustainable mind, yes, it started as a thesis project, but at the same time you kept it going, and it's one of the most successful in its genre, right?
Yes.
So that is a service. That is such a service on behalf of the entire planet. We all should be grateful to you that you're doing it. And the same with queer and woo. This is the path that you've chosen to serve. And yet there are parts like the job you have at Turnkey, you serve at the pleasure of your clients, which is not the same thing as the choices you've made with A Sustainable Mind and with Queer and Woo. Do you understand what I mean?
I definitely do. Yes.
And so I want to pivot a little bit, if it's okay with you, and talk about that for a second. That you, in addition to these two full-time job podcasts that you have, you also are the CEO of Turnkey, where you help many other people create and produce their own podcasts. And
Mhm.
that is, I mean, yay for paying work, good for you. And yet that's another avenue. A, you're good at it, but B, it's another avenue in which you are of service. How does that work within the Marjorie Alexander who sits here today?
Mm. Well, well, first of all, thank you for saying what you said about, a sustainable mind and queer and woo being just their existence, being of service.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
those things drive me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I think about my future, 10 years, 20 years down the line, I see those shows as at least stepping stones. A Sustainable Mind is definitely my calling card. It used to be a book, now it's a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, like, the thing that you can kind of whip out and instantly everybody's interested. Now it's a podcast. That's like the thing to have. But
Mm-hmm.
um, when you said, how does serving your clients, what does that look like
Mm-hmm.
in juxtaposed with everything else? It was a little funny and a little like a little biting, I suppose, because I instantly thought to myself that my personal clients that I have for podcasting or for personal development, or whatever, people come to me for all sorts of different things. Those clients are so easy to work with because they chose me, as
Mm-hmm.
I was in the moment, whatever I was saying on my show or on a couple episodes of A Sustainable Mind. I'm like, now I'm working with individual one-on-one podcast clients, and these are the type of people that I want to work with. Those calls to action have attracted to me very specific people,
Mm-hmm.
and I love to serve them. And I also see with each of them individually the role that they play in my life in teaching me something.
Mm.
Now, when you said Turnkey, and I thought about all the clients I have at Turnkey, I just had a feeling of annoyance.
Ah!
I love my job at Turnkey, by the way. It is fun. There's never a dull day, and it really does give me an opportunity to be a problem solver in terms of like puzzles
Mm-hmm.
or like a math equation where there really is only one answer,
Mm-hmm.
or at least it's like you can open a book, you can do a certain amount of research and know the things that I know in order to help people in the way that I help them
Mm-hmm.
at Turnkey Podcast. It's just a very matter of fact thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not very personal, warm and fuzzy, inside all of us worthiness holding space. Like, it's not that.
Mm-hmm.
Turnkey is very much its own little thing over here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the challenge that I've had recently, as my personal practice will say, I'm not a therapist or anything, but just my personal practice in terms of serving my own clients has grown. The juxtaposition of those things has been really, really interesting to see the type of energy that I give in both cases, the type of energy that I get back in both cases, the amount of fulfillment that I feel in both cases. Like, it's so different.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, I love what I do at Turnkey, and it has really thrust me into a network of people that I think I can lend a unique viewpoint and unique problem solving capabilities just because of my world perspective. I see things differently than all of my colleagues do, and other people in that kind of entrepreneurial circle. And
Hmm.
so I truly do feel like I am um, giving in a way that's unique to me, and without me there would not be that particular ingredient that I add. It is unique, and so I feel very good about that relationship. um but the juxtaposition has been interesting. I'm sure that's not the question you were intending to ask. What was the question you were intending to ask? I probably have veered a little far off, and I want to restate it to make sure that I hit the mark.
Actually, no, you didn't. You answered the question because it is, I can see how it's different. I can see how it's two different flavors of Marjorie. And
Yeah.
the clients that you attracted specifically want to work with you. The clients you work with at Turnkey seem like they want to work with you once they know who you are and what you offer, but they don't want
Hmm.
to work with you before they work with you. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
So
Yes,
that's the
absolutely.
difference. That makes a lot of sense. And yet you said something that I really want to dig into a little bit more. You said you bring a unique sensibility to creating podcasts, to working with the clients at Turnkey. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? And recently I changed the name of this show to the Innovative Mindset Podcast because I want to talk more
Hmm.
about that idea. I love the idea that an innovator is a creative person with a to-do list. This is something that
Hmm.
is driven to achieve a process or a goal. And that's what you're doing, but you're doing it in different ways, in innovative ways. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what sets you apart. What is it that makes you unique as you work with these clients at Turnkey?
Well, it's interesting that you use the word creative because that's kind of what I feel like I'm bringing to the table, in
Mhm,
addition to that community.
mhm,
So, something about Turnkey. Turnkey podcast is a podcast production firm that mostly attracts entrepreneurs,
mhm,
small business owners, authors, writers, speakers. We have a lot of clients who work in like financial products and retirement products.
mhm,
They there's a very I mean we have dozens and dozens of clients, and there are a couple in there who their personality is a little bit more similar to mine. Their content of their show is a little bit more similar to my own shows. But for the most part, our clients are using their podcasts as part of their overall marketing strategy and um, just money making strategy. I mean, it's not all about the bottom line.
mhm,
And that's not to say that the podcasts aren't good or valuable, but I mean, they really are, they're either educating their current client base, or their objective is to grow their client base,
mhm,
or just put information out there to the general public, and, getting people on a mailing list. And then eventually when they need our products, well, they'll think of us.
mhm,
So it's business marketing.
mhm,
It just so happens that the medium is podcasting.
mhm,
That's very different than what I've done. And like you said earlier, when I find gaps, I fill them.
mhm,
And the way that I fill them so far has happened to be podcasts. But my shows are also very community oriented.
mhm,
And so, not that those two things, having the business podcast and having the community, um, make the world a better place kind of, or social podcast is so different,
mhm,
because the ways in which I have promoted my podcasts, the ways that I've thought about monetizing, even though I've kind of shied away from that for the most part. The ways that I've monetized, like the ways that I've done things with my two podcasts, people just don't do over here in the business podcast realm. They just
mhm,
don't.
mhm,
And so usually the different perspective that I offer is that perspective. It's like, well, yes, this is this is a list of all of the ways that you can monetize, or that you can build community, or that you can make your audience feel more like they're sitting on the couch just listening to you and your guests have a conversation. There are ways that you can do that, that you can, Google and read online, but also here are the ways that I've done it. And while my podcast is nothing like yours, why not try it out? So that's kind of just the very, like, well, Marjorie has a different perspective because her podcasts are different.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's all of that. And I think everything we've spent this conversation talking about coming from more of a feeling place, even though in my meetings I'm very much the problem solver, and I'm matter of fact, and just, try to give you the information that you need, although sometimes I do give them a little bit more information than they want, which I've been told, actually. um, it's coming from that place is not something that our clients expect. Now, what I have been pleasantly surprised about is that they love it. 95% of our clients love me. Not like, they love me. They love Marjorie. Oh my God, Marjorie's great. I mean, I hear, my bosses, they're just showering me with, I'm not like words of affirmation type person. At least I don't think that I am. And so it's kind of funny because it sometimes turns me off a little bit, but they're always telling me what the clients are telling them, my bosses. One
Mm-hmm.
does sales, one does the books, and they are the ones that have kind of the conversations that happen before the check gets signed. Once
Mm-hmm.
the check gets signed, then there's me. And somehow the client and my bosses communicate later on, and they're always just ranting and raving about me. But I think it's because I give this something extra element that they weren't expecting, um, using our company as a podcast production house. So those are kind of the things that I'm talking about when I think I do lend a little bit of a different perspective, a little bit of a different way of doing things, but also a different way of delivering the information, and holding space for our clients. Because even if it's not a super emotional topic, you still have to have an ability to listen, and not just listen to what they're saying, but listen to what they're not saying, and then give them what they need, which isn't always what they want. And I think that I'm really good at that.
Can you delve a little bit deeper into that? What do you mean by listen to what they're not saying? That just thrills me. I want to hear more about that.
So one client recently, and I'm trying to fast forward to the end of the story to figure out what I'm going to say, but I'll just go with it and we'll see what comes out. He, so 5 years ago when I started my podcast, I mean, podcasting was so different back then.
Mm,
If for no other reason other than there were just fewer of them.
mm-hmm.
There's so much competition out there. I think we passed 1 million shows. We passed that, I think, in late March.
Mm,
1 million podcasts in the world. And some crazy number like 70% of those haven't released an episode in the last 90 days.
mm-hmm.
But anyway, so we have this client and he launched a couple of months ago. I mean he's still in like his teens in terms of number of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not he messaged us and he said, "I'm not happy with my download numbers and I'm going to take a break." And in communication back and forth with him, it was what he was talking about was, "I don't have time to record. I need more listeners. I'm and I'm and what it really came down to was he needed to feel validated in his current business, his
Uh-huh.
new business, which the new show was part of his new business, and he has a very successful online business that he's been running for years and years and years. And because of the type of business, it actually kind of blew up when Corona happened. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
his business increased threefold literally overnight. And it's
Wow.
so interesting because in this new business that he's starting, and I think he's going to be doing coaching with people, that's kind of the intent down the line. He needed just reassurance that what he was saying was quote unquote correct.
Uh-huh.
But you're lending your advice and your experience of something that you've been doing very successfully for years. He just needed reassurance, but also I'm like, and in terms of your numbers, like we'll tackle the whole uh that's, I suppose that's an issue of worthiness. You know, he didn't feel like his voice was worthy of being heard. It's a very good show, actually, and trust me, I know we have some clients whose shows are not good. um so he was just feeling very in his head about his performance, as if his voice was what caused him to have fewer listeners.
Mm.
Now, if you know anything about podcasting, it doesn't exactly work like that. um but to be a problem solver also, like, what you actually want from us is advice on how to build community, advice on how to put yourself out there. Podcasting is not a build it and they will come. People think that. It's not true. You don't build it and they will come. You put shit out there on Apple and it just sits there. If you don't tell anybody, they're not going to know, they're not going to look for it, and they're not going to be able to listen because they have no clue that you're there. So, on the one hand, yes, you're doing a great job. Keep going. The information that you're providing is valuable. And on the other hand, just market your freaking podcast, dude. You don't put anything on social media. You don't have not emailed your network. You haven't posted anything on LinkedIn. Nobody freaking knows you're there. He has a list of probably tens of thousands of people in his current business that's so super successful. And even though he's selling physical products, has nothing to do with that. But just, hey, by the way, this business, if you're familiar with our founder, blah blah blah, he's got a podcast. If you're interested in I'm not going to say what it is. If you're interested in this, hey, take a listen. Just launched a couple months ago. We would really love to hear what you think. So people, it seems like people just come to you with a complaint, really, and they think that something specific is going to be the answer. It's not.
Hmm.
But it's also not the answer, not because it won't work, but because the problem that they think is the problem is not the problem. There's something else that's the problem. So I don't know. That's just the most recent example. Yeah, it's interesting because even in my personal work as a podcast coach, through my own company, I sold a package recently where it was how to launch a podcast, and that particular course had been put together by my boss, and I was basically just being an affiliate for him.
Mm-hmm.
You purchase that course and you get a month's worth of coaching with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my most recent client who purchased that package, when I met with her the first time, she'd already launched. I'm like, well, what the heck do you need me for?
Mm-hmm.
But again, she just needed help feeling worthy of her voice being heard by everyone out there. There must be some sort of disconnect that happens when you put your voice out on the airwaves. Like when you're having a conversation with people, or you're at an event or a party, like the people who are in your midst, they chose to be there. So obviously they must want to hear from you in one way or another, or at least be okay with being in your presence. But people, they're like, oh, I want to talk about this topic. But I think they put that information out there and then they realize, oh crap, I don't know if I want to be heard by people. What if they don't want to hear from me? Well, they downloaded it, they pressed play, and if they're 5 minutes in and they're still listening, then they want to hear from you. There's a lot of weird stuff in the head of podcasters about feeling worthy enough to be heard. And for all of my challenges with worthiness, apparently I don't have that particular problem.
Yay for the rest of
um
us.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. Those are really the only examples that I can think of right now. But as a coach, which is fairly new for me, I've only been doing it for a couple of years now with podcasting and personal development and a couple of other things. Um, People just aren't asking the question that they actually want the answer to. And it's figuring out what their question actually is I think what I'm particularly good at. And I'll repeat it back to them. I ask a lot of questions, ask questions, ask questions. It's a fact finding expedition. It's being an anthropologist, which is what I got my undergraduate degree in. Not
Mm.
sure if that helped at all. But
Oh,
asking them questions, asking them questions, asking them questions, because then I can actually get to what the question is supposed to be. And then they're like, ah, yes, that's it. What were you going to say?
are you asking me?
Sure.
Well, so yeah, I think it's a twofold thing, actually. I agree completely with you that that is a gift you have. And I think that there's something a little bit further, and that is that there is a vulnerability and almost a tenderness that people have around the questions that they're afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you innately, again, hold space for that, and you ask in such a way that it helps them do the self-exploration to come out with sort of the question that they actually wanted the answer to, because that question feels vulnerable.
Hmm.
And so, uh-oh, by the way you said, I'm wondering if you hadn't thought of it that way before, because I'm about to ask you, how do you do that? And if you
Well, I
haven't thought of
hadn't
it.
thought about it before.
Okay. So,
Um,
yeah, because do you see what I mean? Because that there's a communication style that I think you innately possess that allows that to happen, where you can go pretty deep with people. Certainly you and I, within 4 minutes of meeting each other, we're talking about the deepest things. And it
yeah.
felt very easy, I think, for both of us. And so what do you think accounts for that? Do you is it just an innate thing, or is there something that you have studied or thought about that helps you be in that position of helping your clients think differently about these long held beliefs that they might already have?
Well, the thing that comes to mind immediately is having, I won't say zero expectations, because that actually, in my mind at least, has a negative connotation,
Mhm.
but releasing all expectations.
Mhm.
So they can just show up and say, I'm just like, whatever you say is fine. Whatever
Mhm.
you ask is right. It's whatever you're feeling and feeling that you need in the moment. It's whatever questions you have or think that you have, or questions that you have, and they just happen to, those happen to be the words that you use to ask it, because sometimes they're not aware of the question that they, and it's just a tweak of language, and
Mhm.
then the words being rearranged and the vocabulary being slightly different, they have the realization, oh wait, that even more closely communicates what I wanted to ask, and actually that halfway gets me to the answer, because I didn't realize that that was the question that I had.
Mhm.
Then just putting the question in front of them in a different way. He So releasing expectations and really coming from a place of listening. And you can even listen when you're talking, like asking the questions, because really you're just reflecting back to them what they just said to you. So in a way, they're just speaking different words through you.
Mhm.
I'm saying that and I'm making a face at myself like, Marjorie, are you really saying that? And do you really believe that? And I do, but it feels weird. This is another one of those, like, oh boy, I'm just, I tiptoed a little bit into more woo right then, and didn't even realize I was going there.
Hmm.
Um, so releasing expectations, uh, because when you have expectations, you already have the answer in your mind and you're not really listening to them. Because most of the time, I don't have the answer. And even after I have said whatever I've said in response, I still don't have the answer. I'm really just talking to them and making them feel comfortable that what they said and what they feel is valid, that there's nothing wrong with that, and that I personally have no judgment on it at all. And that puts them in a state of being able to be completely relaxed about it. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how I do that. I definitely see that I do that, but it's not something that I've ever tried to articulate just because I assumed that I couldn't, or now I'm getting to this point in my like with my own business of just starting to, I don't even want to use the words market myself, um but starting to put myself out there saying, hey, if you're challenged with this, that, or the other in particular, I might be able to help you. It feels very intangible, like I don't know the words to use because I don't know how I do what I do, and people just come to me for random stuff and they're always happy and grateful and they pay me. but
Yay.
but when they show up, we don't know what we're working on, and half of the time when we're done, we don't know what we just worked on.
Hmm.
I have podcasting clients that we blocked out half an hour and I wind up on the phone with them for 2.5, 3 hours, just talking about, like we're doing right now, like really deep stuff that has nothing to do with podcasting or whatever it is that we said we were going to work on. But they just feel so incredibly grateful for the conversation and they're happy to work with me and to continue working with me. The relationship is it feels very, um, there's very much a give and take there. And again, like I said earlier, I get stuff from it as well. Working with people on certain challenges helps me see my own challenges from a different perspective. It helps me be kinder to myself on a day-to-day basis and be kinder to the child version of me. Um, as they say, hold your little 4-year-old self and tell that little girl or that little boy or that little person that everything's going to be okay. Like, we're having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I do it. This is the way that I communicate. And there are times when I've like, because most people I think exist at like this very surface level conversation place.
Mm.
And in the last few months, I've dipped down into I don't want to talk about that stuff. I want to talk about something deeper. And if you're not willing to go here with me, I pretty much have no use for conversation with you, which sounds terrible. It sounds terrible, but I'm just recognizing that I'm like, I have so little patience for surface level conversation. I want to go deep. I don't want to talk about what you think we should be talking about. The opinions that people expect you to have. I want to talk about your uncertainties. And I want to talk about your hopes and your dreams that have taken twice as long to come to fruition. And you're frustrated about why. I want to talk about next steps. And you have no idea how to get there. And just talk about it. Those are the conversations that I want to be having. I don't know how I do it, but I know that when I do it and the person hasn't come to me asking for that, certain people are very grateful and other people they recoil. And I've learned to kind of see that before, like right at the beginning when it starts to happen, because it's turned a lot of people off, and in some cases it's created a lot of friction.
Mm,
Um, so while I think I'm great at it, it's, there's a time and place for everything.
mm,
And if you have to be having conversations with certain people, for instance, family members or colleagues, um, it's probably better to be able to turn that knob on and off, or at least turn the dial up and down a little bit, because I have such a strong desire to be in that place all the time now. It gets me in trouble because I almost I get bored, or I just don't want to have just the everyday conversations. I'm bored of it. I'm bored. Yeah, I guess that's all. I'm
I
like
love it.
I'm like I'm like, do I want to say more about this, or am I just going to keep repeating the same thing? So,
It's so fascinating. This is a lesson that I've been learning. Do you know who Derek Sivers is?
no.
Ah, do you know the website CD Baby?
Yes.
Okay, he started CD Baby.
Ah, okay.
And he's a musician, and he started CD Baby a few years ago. He sold it to disc makers and then went off to live in a hut in New Zealand, and now he writes about music and marketing, and yeah, and he gave all the money he sold it for to charity. Like, he's like,
Mm,
here you go, here's CD Baby, I'm going to give all the money away, and now I'm going to go live in a hut in New Zealand. Anyway, he wrote this book called Anything You Want, which is a very short little half-hour read, if that. And in it, he had this one chapter title that said, "If not hell yeah, then no."
oh, that guy. I've
Yes.
read that article like 5 times.
I love that, because that's what you've just been talking about. It's, if you're going to have a conversation that isn't going to be the kind of conversation that I really want and need, then you need to go talk to somebody else, because it's not really me. I'm not the person to have this conversation. And that's the thing
Yes.
with what you just said. There was so much wealth and richness in what you just said. I just loved it. One of the things, when you said that you provide essentially a judgment-free zone,
Hmm.
can you imagine how someone who fears being judged must feel when they realize that they're in the presence of someone who's not going to judge them?
Yes, because that's how I feel with you.
Oh, you're a delight. Thank you. I appreciate that. You honor me.
I mean, that was so simple. I'm like, absolutely, it's you. It's
That's
you. I mean, I have a lot of close friends. I love them dearly, but they do not provide a judgment-free zone. I do have a couple people, but it's only a couple people. You know what I mean?
You honor me. I appreciate that. But that's what you're providing, right? That's it must be such a relief, right? When your client talks to you and they go, "She's actually listening to me." Wow. That must be so lovely. And I think, as far as what you said to me, and I really appreciate your words, I think that, again, mutual admiration society, but also a word that I've been wanting to say to you this whole conversation is the word recognition. We
Mhm.
recognize each other. People who want to delve deep and really see each other and really hold space for each other in that judgment-free, vulnerable place, recognize each other. And when
Yes.
you do, it is magical. And to me, magic is not a woo woo thing. To me, is magic is sort of science that we haven't figured out yet. But it
Mhm.
is that magical idea and feeling of recognition. Oh yeah, you are someone I can be me with. And when you offer that to your clients and they recoil, I imagine they're probably not ready to be them yet.
Yeah.
A-
Mhm.
and so maybe knowing that you're there when they do need you is balm enough for now, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's lovely. And this idea of having clients who come to you because they want to work with you, I want that so much. I always want that. When This is why I know I can't really work for anybody else anymore, because because I my whole career has been built on people who want to work with me rather than me. My success, I guess, as you would say, has been built that way. And so when you're in that space and you're working with people who want to work with you, with Marjorie, and the clients that love you at Turnkey Podcast, same thing. They must sense that presence that you have that allows them an avenue to be them, an avenue to speak their truth. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's lovely. And again, I go back to the word tender, allowing someone into that space and encouraging them to be them so that you can be a crucible for them. It must just be such a relief. And I love that about you. And I think that when we chat about some of this stuff that's more like, oh, this is the business world and this is the business podcast, there's something that people recognize. And we have, 8 billion people on the planet, right? So the people who recognize that there is a safe space with you or with me, and I'm grateful that you added me into that uh, group, that's something that is something special. That's something singular. And so what I want to know, if you want to speculate, how do we cultivate more of that? How do we make that blossom?
Well, probably the first thing would be to stop judging ourselves because it's
Mm,
contagious,
mm,
terribly so.
mhm,
And how I've gotten to a place of being able to do it and not have gotten as far as I think I should be in my own journey of not being judgmental of myself.
mm.
Um, but I do have my moments, and I think that that's that's
Don't we all?
that. Yeah, I mean that has saved me because I'm, in all of this darkness, at some points, I guess I find a lighter or a match or something, and I'm able to get a light on
Mhm,
and long enough to be like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I'm here. I'm me, and that's good, and that's okay. And like the world isn't gonna fall apart because someone sees me or hears me. And I don't mean my voice. I mean hears me, like
mhm,
my essence.
mhm,
Um, how do we cultivate more of that? Stop paying attention to so much damn media.
mm,
Um, and I say I guess I should be a little bit more specific. And I'll make 2 points here. So I recently did an interview, like an email interview, like they wrote out questions and then I just typed up the answers. And one of my answers had to do with how I am able to create the content that I do. And I made a point that it's very difficult to be a good and creative content creator when you're being such a regular and consistent content consumer. That shapes your worldview,
mhm,
how you see yourself, what you listen to on a regular basis, and what you view on a regular basis. I mean, that is the frame that you see the world through.
mhm,
Period.
mhm,
It's you can't just, I mean, you can, I suppose, but it takes muscles to be receiving a ton of information and then to turn around and be able to see and go about the world from a perspective that is completely unchanged by what you just saw and heard. So that's the first thing.
mhm,
Second thing is, if you're going to consume content, just be super intentional about it. I love listening to podcasts that teach me something or give me an insight into certain parts of history that we don't talk about a whole
mhm,
lot. things that can help me expand my mind, the way that I think about myself and the world, not determine the way that I think about myself and the world, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's another thing, is just, go about like entertainment and like consuming content in a different way. Um, what else? How can we cultivate more of that? Just being honest. Like, when someone asks you how you're doing, most of the time we say, I'm great, how are you? Or I'm here. That's a term that people in my family use a lot for whatever reason. I'm here, just to say, like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't know what that means. It just, okay, so you're here and you're living and breathing. So, but you didn't answer my question. And also, you're making it seem like you're not doing well, but you also don't want to talk about it. Um, I think most people probably don't intend to actually ask you how you are, like really know who you are, how you are.
Mm-hmm.
But, and the answer can be very short, but maybe just give them an answer that's truthful and not just, one of a list of 5 things that are just the way that people answer this question. Be able to just be able to say, this is how I'm doing. I mean, since you asked, thank you, by the way. This is how I'm doing. Maybe I'm having a crappy day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to say it like that, but just be open and be vulnerable. And doing something as simple as actually answering that question instead of just giving a typical answer. Um, and sometimes it can be a conversation starter. Sometimes people are off put by it, and then they just, like, they don't delve any deeper. They don't ask any questions. They just kind of, it's like, okay, backing out of the room now.
Right.
This seems uncomfortable.
Right. Right.
Or maybe they surprise you and it's like, oh my God, I'm doing fantastic. Well, why? Like, what's going on? What are you working on? And that opens the door for um an actual conversation. So I don't know. Those are 3 things that I can think of in the moment. If you give me long enough, I could probably think of a dozen, but
Those are great. And no, they are, because it's funny, earlier in the conversation we were talking about my invisible tattoo on my forehead. When I ask, people do, well, let me tell you about the horrible
yeah.
time I'm having or whatever. And
Hmm.
there is this unspoken pact that we tend to have in our society, I think, that is, I'll ask you how you are, you'll tell me you're fine, you'll ask me how I am, I'll tell you I'm fine, and we don't have to delve any deeper.
Hmm.
And the most interesting conversations, I think, often end up being when somebody says, well, actually, here's how I'm really doing. And if you
Yes.
can, hold space for that, there can be something really, again, I come back to that word tender and vulnerable and delightful. By the end of that conversation, you might have a lifelong friend.
Hmm.
So there's something that I agree with you completely. And yet it is interesting to me that here we are creating content for people to consume, even while you said stop consuming
I
all the content.
know.
But there is this, but there is that piece of it that we need to be very intentional. I really believe that we are hyperstimulated and we have so many things coming at us, so many lights
Hmm.
and bells and whistles all the time, that it is hard to figure out how to be intentional about what we put our attention to. And I think
Yeah.
in order to really be whole, we have to be super intentional about it. I agree with you completely. It's a lifelong process for me because I grew up on television and that's how I learned
Hmm.
to speak English. That's what I
Hmm.
that those were my models. My model of the perfect dad was Carson Drew in the Nancy Drew mystery stories.
Hmm.
My model of the perfect woman was Jamie Summers, the Bionic Woman. She was the perfect woman.
Oh yeah.
And so that to me was, those were the lessons, and I learned them and kept with them, and use TV as a touchstone even today, I will tell what my friend Dan calls teleparables. I will say, like we did with the Star Trek episode, have you seen this? And this is the lesson that I took from it, and here's how it applies. So I think being intentional is important. And I think there is a time where we can open ourselves up to learn, whether it's from another person or a book or TV show or a podcast or whatever, where we can be curious. And
Mhm.
that to me is the point. And so I would love to ask you, what are you curious about right now? What are you learning?
Wow. What am I curious about? Well, first of all, I'm curious about this whole empath thing. I once I am realize that I'm interested in something and I latch on to it, I dive deep. And I am so excited to be delving more deeply into this book and this particular author who is an MD. And so I, my more logical side has something to latch onto as well. And that makes the whole thing a little bit more comfortable while I'm learning this new thing about myself. But also, I'm excited to learn about and explore stepping into my purpose. I have a pretty damn good idea now. Like I think I've nailed it. And it's a super uncomfortable and in some actually well, in a lot of ways taboo thing. And I'm excited to learn more about that thing and see about how I can interweave that into everything else that I do, into my podcasting, my personal podcasting, and my coaching
Mm-hmm.
with individuals. Um, yeah, and I know that sounds super cryptic because I've only told probably one other person about this particular thing, and she happens to be an energy worker that I've been working with recently.
Mm.
That helps me release inherited emotions, and I
Mm.
am using that voice because that's another one of the things that I don't talk about this because it's super woo, and like, some people go to chiropractors and some people go to therapists, and like I've been to therapists, but this, like working with her, man, can you just imagine coming to someone with your problems? They just let you talk for 15 minutes, they write down a bunch of notes, and then they turn around and for 60 whole minutes, they're basically speaking affirmations into your head about you. That's what she does. It's
Wow.
amazing. Like, whether you believe in energy workers or whatever, just that alone is amazing. That's the role that they play for you. And I mean, of course I pay her to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped me so much, releasing inherited emotional DNA.
Mm.
Man, oh man, that stuff works. I tell you, it has helped me through so much. And I've only been working with her for like 2 or 3 months. Um, but yeah, that's what I'm excited to learn about. Is I truly feel like in the last 4 or 5 months, right before Corona, late February, have discovered what my true purpose is and how I was truly meant to help and serve people. And I am just at the beginning of that journey. And that is super exciting. And especially as a Black person and as a queer person, because in that line of work, which there are only like a few dozen people that do that in like the whole world that are certified to do that, there aren't any people that look like me that do that. There aren't any queer people that do that. And so again, it's me finding some gap and jumping in. And that feels exciting.
Mm. And again, you're a trailblazer. I mean, I'm just going to start referring to you as that because that's what it is. That's what it is. I'm so grateful that we've had this conversation. This is so,
Is this going to be a two-parter?
nope, nope. It's not. It's not. I know. I know. We could continue this for the next 6 hours and
I know. You and I, we could have marathon
it's
conversations.
true. No,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a two-parter. I
Okay.
actually I have this isn't the longest podcast interview I've ever done. I have one coming in August that I was going to make a three-parter because it's over 3 hours long, and I just
Wow.
yesterday decided, nope, it's all going to be on one episode, and people
Nice.
can listen as they decide they want to. It's that's yeah. I It's my podcast and I'll cry if I want to, right? Uh so yeah, no, this is I wouldn't dream of splitting this conversation up. There's too much good stuff in it. I do want to say that I know you have vacation to go do, so I'm gonna I'm gonna let you go. But I have that one question that
Yeah.
I ask everybody before the end of my show that I would love to get your thoughts on. But before I do that, Marjorie, I want to thank you again. This has been such a true delight is a small word, but it is. It's such a delight to speak with you on these incredibly important topics, and I'm really grateful that you joined me.
Ditto. Ditto.
So
Thank
good.
you.
So good. Ah, so here's my last question that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast, and I would love to have your answer. If you had an airplane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Be kind. And then you can insert after that whatever you want. To others, to yourself, to your children, to your parents, to the world, to the planet, to your pets. Be kind. It takes almost no effort at all, at least for me. Maybe for some it does. But it takes far less effort to be kind. And you get so much more good stuff back than with anything else. Just be kind.
I love that. And do you want to know partially why I love that? Why I love that is because I would expect no different from you. But here is the interesting thing to me about that and
Oh
our
boy.
mutual admiration society. No, 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 it's not a bad thing at all. So a few weeks ago, Jennifer Ashley Tepper, who's a Broadway producer, was on the show, and I asked her the question, and she gave me her answer, and then she said, "But Isolda, what would you say?" And I went, no one's ever asked me that in all of these interviews. No one's ever asked me that. And would you like to know what I said?
I would love to.
I said, be kind.
No freaking way.
Absolutely. That was
Oh
my
my
answer.
God.
That exactly was my answer. Be kind. So when you said it, I'm like, of course that's what she said.
Okay.
I'm not at all surprised. So yeah,
Wow.
that was my answer to that question. Like with not thinking about it, that was my answer. And I said something like, be kind. And if I had a second one, I would say leave it better than you found it. But the first one was be kind. And again, like you said, to animals, to people, to the earth, to the planet, to yourself. That's such an important aspect of all of this. And I think it's a perfect place for us to end this. And I think of all of my things, I think I've just figured out how I'm going to start ending every episode with just those two little words. Be kind. That's it. Perfect.
I love it. I love
So
it.
thank you again, Marjorie. I really appreciate you being here. And I hope I will absolutely put all of the various social media into the show notes. Find Queer and Woo on Instagram. Find A Sustainable Mind. Find Marjorie. She's obviously you've heard for yourself what an incredible person she is. If you are liking what you're hearing, please leave a review for the show where you listen, whether it's Apple, Google, Stitcher, any other place. Leave a review, comment, and let me know what you're thinking about and how you want to bring that kind of sense of self-worth and sense of creativity and innovation into your life. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Innovative Mindset Podcast, and I will leave you with those two little words: be kind. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, remember to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind.